Imagine meeting a complete stranger, extending your hand and briefly locking palms. It feels polite, normal, even meaningless. But for most of human history, that small gesture could decide whether you lived or died. So here's the question. Why do we still shake hands, long after swords disappeared and trust is no longer tested at arm's length? The answer isn't just about manners. It's about fear, power, survival, and a signal humans have been sending to each other for thousands of years, often without realizing it. To understand the handshake, we have to strip it of its modern politeness and return to a far more dangerous world. For most of history, approaching another person was risky. Strangers could be enemies. Hands were where weapons were held. Extending an empty hand wasn't friendly. It was strategic. It said, "I am not about to attack you." This wasn't symbolism. It was information. And in a time when misunderstandings could turn fatal in seconds, information mattered more than words. One of the earliest references to hand-to-hand gestures comes from ancient Mesopotamia and Greece, where grasping forearms or hands signaled temporary peace. In ancient Greek art, you can find depictions of gods and heroes clasping hands as a sign of alliance or agreement. But here's the key detail people often miss. It wasn't about warmth or kindness. It was about vulnerability. Showing your weapon hand meant giving up the ability to strike, at least momentarily. That brief exposure was a test. If the other person didn't attack, trust could begin. This becomes even clearer when we move into medieval Europe. Knights didn't shake hands the way we do today. They often grabbed each other's forearms. Why? Because daggers were commonly hidden in sleeves. Gripping the forearm wasn't just greeting, it was a search. You were checking for weapons while appearing respectful. Over time, as weapons became less hidden and armor changed, the gesture softened. The grip slid down from the forearm to the hand. The meaning stayed, even as the danger faded. There's a real historical moment that shows just how serious this gesture once was. In ancient Rome, political agreements were sometimes sealed not with documents, but with a public clasping of right hands, known as the dextrarum iunctio. This wasn't symbolic fluff. Breaking a hand-clasped agreement could destroy reputations or trigger retaliation. Trust was embodied, literally, in the hand. When leaders shook hands in public, they were staking their honor on that physical act. But the handshake didn't survive just because of tradition. It survived because the human brain responds to it in powerful ways. Modern neuroscience shows that physical touch, especially brief, socially accepted touch like a handshake, releases oxytocin, a hormone linked to trust and bonding. This means the handshake doesn't just signal trust, it creates it. The body reacts before the mind catches up. What began as a survival check evolved into a biological shortcut for cooperation. This helps explain why handshakes spread so widely across cultures, even those with very different customs. While not universal, variations of hand-touch greetings appear independently in many societies. That's important. It suggests the handshake wasn't invented once and copied. It emerged repeatedly because it solved a fundamental human problem: how to show peaceful intent quickly. But here's where things get interesting. The modern handshake isn't just about peace, it's about equality. Unlike bowing, kneeling, or saluting, a handshake places both people at the same level. No one is physically above the other. That made it especially popular in societies that valued mutual respect over hierarchy. In fact, one group played a major role in spreading the handshake as we know it today: the Quakers. In the 17th century, Quakers rejected social hierarchies. They refused to bow to nobles or remove their hats to authority figures. Instead, they used the handshake as a universal greeting, one that treated everyone the same. Over time, this simple act took on a new meaning. It wasn't just, "I'm not armed." It was, "I recognize you as an equal." As Quakers influenced business and social norms, especially in England and America, the handshake followed. This shift explains why the handshake became deeply tied to deals, contracts, and professionalism. Long before paperwork was standardized, people trusted agreements sealed by a handshake. Even today, phrases like "a handshake deal" carry moral weight. Breaking one feels worse than breaking a written contract, even when the law says otherwise. That emotional reaction isn't accidental. It's inherited. There's also a lesser-known and controversial theory about handshakes that adds another layer. Some anthropologists believe handshakes allowed humans to subtly assess each other through smell. The hand carries chemical signals. By touching and then unconsciously bringing the hand closer to the face, people may have gathered information about health, mood, or familiarity. Studies have shown that people often sniff their hands after shaking without realizing it. It's unsettling, but it suggests the handshake may carry sensory data we don't consciously register. As societies modernized, the original dangers that made handshakes necessary began to disappear, yet the gesture stayed. Why? Because once a signal becomes embedded in culture, it outlives its original purpose. The handshake became a ritual, a performance of trust, respect, and normalcy. Not shaking hands could be interpreted as suspicion, arrogance, or hostility. The meaning flipped. What once prevented violence now risks social friction if avoided. This became especially clear during global health crises, when handshakes were suddenly discouraged. People didn't just lose a habit, they lost a social anchor. Awkward pauses replaced automatic gestures. People felt rude even when being safe. That discomfort reveals how deeply the handshake is wired into social expectations. It's not just what we do, it's what we expect others to do. And yet, not every culture embraced the handshake in the same way. In Japan, bowing remained dominant. In parts of the Middle East, handshakes can be prolonged and expressive, or restricted by gender norms. These differences remind us that the handshake isn't inevitable. It's a choice societies made based on values, power structures, and social needs. So why do we still shake hands today? Not because we need to prove we're unarmed. Not because we consciously think about trust. We do it because the gesture survived every phase of human development: violence, hierarchy, equality, commerce, and adapted each time. It's a fossilized behavior still doing emotional work long after its original function faded. The next time you shake someone's hand, remember this. You're participating in an ancient test of intent, equality, and trust. A gesture that once said, "I won't kill you," now says, "I acknowledge you." And that transformation might be the most human thing about it. If something so small can carry that much history, it makes you wonder, what other everyday habits are quietly telling stories we've forgotten to listen to?